At exactly 3:17 a.m., the security footage froze. Not glitched. Not corrupted. Frozen. One frame. Perfectly clear. Perfectly still. The man stood alone in the room, just as he had for the last 43 minutes. No movement. No shadows crossing the floor. No doors opening. Then the screen stuttered. One single frame dropped. And when the image stabilized, someone was standing behind him. A black woman. No alert triggered. No motion sensor tripped. No access log recorded an entry. She hadn't walked in. She hadn't appeared on any camera before this moment. She was simply there, standing close enough that her shadow touched his back. Security analysts would later replay the footage thousands of times, frame by frame, searching for the moment she arrived. They never found it. Because according to the system, she had always been there. The man in the footage didn't turn around, didn't react, didn't flinch. Which is strange, because the human body reacts before the mind understands. Heart rate spikes. Shoulders tense. Breathing changes. But at 3:17 a.m., none of that happened. The camera froze before his body could respond. And that may have been the system's last act of self-preservation. Because everything that happened after that frame, every death, every disappearance, every sealed report, started with what the camera saw. And what it refused to keep recording. If you're watching this late at night, alone, with the lights low, you might want to pause for a second. Because this story isn't about what was caught on camera. It's about what the camera tried not to see. And before we go any further, if you're drawn to stories like this, stories that hide their teeth until it's too late, make sure you're subscribed. Not because it helps the channel, but because these stories tend to come back. And you'll want to know when the next one does. Now, let's talk about the building where this footage came from. Because places like this don't make mistakes. And they don't imagine things. The footage didn't come from a convenience store camera, or a parking garage, or some forgotten hallway no one cared about. It came from a Tier 7 security facility. The kind of building that doesn't officially exist. No name on the outside. No public records. No reason for anyone to be there unless they were powerful or dangerous. Every inch of it was monitored. Every hallway. Every room. Every breath. Especially that room. Because that camera, camera 17, wasn't part of the general system. It was isolated. Air-gapped. Hardwired. No wireless access. No remote login. Only 3 people in the entire organization had clearance to view its footage. 3. The first was the head of internal security. He accessed the footage once. 2 days later, his car was found abandoned on a bridge outside the city. Engine still warm. Driver's door open. He was never seen again. The second was a senior systems engineer. He pulled the footage, flagged it, and wrote a single line in the incident report. This file should not exist. That night, he died in his apartment. No signs of forced entry. No weapon found. Cause of death listed as cardiac arrest, despite the fact that he was 34 years old and had no history of heart problems. The third person accessed the footage at 3:19 a.m., 2 minutes after the freeze. There is no death certificate for the third. No missing person report. No resignation. No digital footprint after that moment. It's as if he stepped out of the system entirely. After that, the footage was flagged at the highest level. Red sealed. Compartmentalized. Buried beneath layers of classification so deep that even automated audits skipped over it. Officially, camera 17 malfunctioned. Officially, the file was corrupted. Officially, nothing unusual occurred at 3:17 a.m. Unofficially, someone tried to erase it. At 4:02 a.m., an automated purge command was issued. The kind that deletes data permanently. No recovery. No backups. The command executed. The system confirmed deletion. And then, without prompting, the file reappeared. Same size. Same timestamp. Same frozen frame. The purge command was issued again. And again. Each time, The system responded with the same error message. Not access denied. Not file in use. Just 5 words. Unable to overwrite existing data. Engineers would later argue over what that meant. Some said the file was protected. Others said the system had glitched. But one junior analyst, someone who would quietly resign a week later, said something no one could explain. He said the system wasn't protecting the file. It was protecting itself. Because every time the deletion command ran, internal temperatures spiked, processors throttled, failsafes engaged, as if keeping that image cost the system energy, as if erasing her would cost it more. By sunrise, the order came down from the top. No more deletion attempts. No more access. No more questions. The footage was sealed. And it would have stayed buried if the system hadn't done one last thing. At exactly 3:17 a.m. the following night, the file duplicated itself. Same frame. Same woman. Same impossible presence. And beneath it, a system log entry that no human typed. Persistence confirmed. The system refused to overwrite her. The man standing in that frozen frame wasn't a nobody. His name wasn't released publicly. But inside certain circles, it didn't need to be. He was a decision maker. The kind of man whose signature could collapse markets, reroute governments, or make people disappear without raising his voice. People feared him. Not because he was loud, but because he was quiet. Because nothing ever seemed to touch him. No scandals. No threats. No leaks. He moved through the world wrapped in protocols and distance, insulated from consequence. Which is why on that night, he was alone. Not by accident. By design. Protocol required that no one share the room with him after midnight. No guards. No assistants. No witnesses. The building wasn't empty. But the room was. And it was meant to be. Because if something happened, the cameras would see it. And the cameras never lied. At least, that's what he believed. He trusted surveillance more than people. More than loyalty. More than instinct. Cameras didn't panic. Cameras didn't betray you. Cameras didn't imagine things that weren't there. Every movement in that building was logged. Every door recorded. Every breath accounted for. There were no blind spots. No dark corners. And no reason for anyone, to be standing behind him. He had no enemies inside the building. Anyone who might have wanted him dead didn't get close enough to breathe the same air. That was the point of the system. That was the point of the cameras. Which is why, when analysts reviewed the footage, they didn't ask who the woman was first. They asked something else. Why didn't he react? Because in the seconds before the freeze, his posture never changed. His shoulders didn't tense. His head didn't tilt. His body didn't register a presence. It was as if whatever stood behind him didn't exist yet. Not to him. Not to the system. And not to the part of the human brain that warns you when you're not alone. Which is why what happened next broke him. When panic didn't produce answers, they did what professionals always do. They slowed it down. The frozen frame was copied, isolated, and pulled into a forensic suite normally reserved for counter-terrorism footage and high-profile assassinations. Every pixel mattered. Analysts enlarged the image 1% at a time. They expected artifacts. Compression errors. Motion blur. But the woman behind him wasn't blurred. Her outline was sharp. Cleaner, in fact, than the man in the foreground. Her features held definition where the rest of the image began to soften, like the camera had decided, on its own, what deserved clarity. That alone should have been impossible. Security cameras don't choose focus. They don't prioritize subjects. But she was precise. They adjusted contrast, brightness, thermal overlays. The man registered heat. Normal human output. The woman did not. Not cold. Not warm. Just absent. Then someone noticed her feet. Or rather, the way they didn't quite belong. Her shoes hovered a fraction of an inch above the floor. Not floating. Not lifting. Misaligned. As if the image of her had been layered incorrectly onto the room. As if gravity had been applied loosely. The room had a polished concrete floor, reflective enough to show outlines. The man's reflection was there. distorted slightly by light. Hers was not. They zoomed in again. That's when they saw the shadow. The overhead lights cast everything in the room toward the east wall. Desks. Chairs. The man himself. But the woman's shadow stretched in the opposite direction. West. Directly toward the camera. As if the light source behind her didn't exist in the room. As if it existed somewhere else entirely. No one spoke for a long time. They were trained not to panic. Trained to explain anomalies. But this wasn't an anomaly. It was consistency. Every adjustment made her clearer. Every enhancement made her more present. And then, someone noticed her mouth. It hadn't moved between frames. It hadn't changed position. But once it was pointed out, it couldn't be unseen. The corners of her lips curved upward. Not wide. Not exaggerated. Just enough. Then someone noticed she was smiling. After the frame-by-frame analysis, the next step was obvious. They searched for her arrival. Every camera feeds into the system. Every corridor. Every stairwell. Every elevator. If she entered the room, the system would show it. They started 2 hours earlier. Nothing. She wasn't in the hallway. Not in the stairwell. Not in the service corridors. They widened the search. 4 hours. 6. Still nothing. The man entered the room alone. The door closed behind him. And until 3:17 a.m., he remained alone. No skipped frames. No dropped packets. No camera outages. The footage was perfect. Which meant she hadn't come from anywhere. Next, they checked reflections. The room had glass, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Polished surfaces. Chrome fixtures. Plenty of places where she should have appeared indirectly. The man's reflection was visible in every surface. Her absence was consistent. She wasn't reflected in the glass. Not in the windows. Not in the desk. Not in the polished floor beneath her misaligned feet. It wasn't that the system failed to render her reflection. It was as if reflections simply ignored her. As if light didn't acknowledge her presence. They ran a reconstruction. Rendered the room digitally. Rebuilt the lighting conditions. Simulated human movement. In every simulation, a figure entering the room produced reflections before reaching the man. But the woman in the footage didn't follow that rule. She didn't approach. She didn't cross the space between the door and his back. She wasn't present until she was already there. The analysts marked the timestamp. 3 hours 17 minutes seconds. Room occupied by one subject. 3 hours 17 minutes .041 seconds. 2 subjects detected. No transitional frames. No overlap. She didn't enter the frame. She resolved into it. And when they compared that moment across every available camera in the building, the hallways, the stairwells, the elevators, they found something worse. At the exact moment she appeared behind him, every other camera in the building showed nothing unusual. No movement. No glitch. No shadow passing. It was as if the event only existed in that room. Only in relation to him. Only where he was standing. As if she didn't exist independently. As if she needed him to exist. Up to that point, the footage had been silent. No audio track. No ambient sound. No record of voices or movement. That was normal. Camera 17 was visual only. Installed to watch, not listen. But after everything they'd seen, silence felt like something missing. So they tried something unconventional. They extracted the raw data stream beneath the video. The electrical noise. The signal residue. Every camera generates it. A low-level hum created by power flow and internal processing. Normally, it's meaningless. This time, it wasn't. When the signal was isolated and converted into an audible range, the room filled with a slow, rhythmic thudding. A heartbeat. At first, they assumed it belonged to the man. They overlaid the pattern with biometric data pulled from his medical file. It didn't match. The rhythm was wrong. Too slow. Too steady. Human hearts fluctuate. They stutter. They react. This one didn't. Then someone adjusted the frequency. Dropped it lower. And a second rhythm emerged beneath the first. Deeper. Heavier. Not synced. Two heartbeats occupying the same space. One irregular, human. The other precise, mechanical, patient. The second pulse didn't spike when the man shifted his weight. Didn't change when he leaned forward. Didn't respond to stress. It simply continued. Uninterrupted. As if it wasn't reacting to the room, but sustaining it. The analysts compared timestamps. The second heartbeat didn't exist before 3:17 a.m. It began the exact moment she appeared. They enhanced it further. Slowed it down. Filtered out background noise. And what remained made several people step back from the monitors. Because the sound wasn't just a pulse. It had depth. A wetness to it. A pressure. Like something moving fluid instead of blood. Like something circulating without lungs. One analyst muted the audio abruptly. The room stayed quiet for a moment longer than necessary. Then someone asked the question no one wanted to answer. If that isn't his heartbeat, whose is it? No one spoke. Because by then the answer felt obvious. It was coming from her. The next movement in the footage doesn't happen for almost 3 minutes. The man remains standing exactly where he was. Shoulders square, hands resting on the desk, head facing forward. Then, at 3:19 a.m., he moves. Not suddenly. Not like someone startled. Slowly. Too slowly. He steps away from the desk and turns toward the door. That's when analysts noticed something was wrong. His posture had changed. His shoulders were slightly hunched, as if the space behind him had weight. As if something was pulling at his spine. When he walked, his steps were careful. Measured. Like someone navigating a room they could no longer fully see. The door opened. The hallway camera picked him up immediately. And for the first time since he entered the building that night, his eyes were visible. They were wide. Not panicked. Not frantic. Focused. Locked forward. As if he were afraid of what might be behind him. Because from that moment on, in every piece of footage that followed, he never looked back. Not once. He didn't glance over his shoulder in the hallway. Didn't check reflections in the elevator doors. Didn't react when another employee spoke his name. He moved through the building like a man who knew something was following him. And knew that acknowledging it would make it worse. Security logs show he left the building at 3:27 a.m. No irregularities. No alarms. Just a man walking into the rain. By morning, the changes were undeniable. He arrived late, something he'd never done before. He skipped the executive briefing. Ignored messages that would have demanded an immediate response days earlier. When staff finally saw him in person, they said he looked diminished. Smaller. Not physically but internally. Like someone who had been emptied out and refilled incorrectly. He flinched at sudden sounds. Avoided reflective surfaces. And when someone asked him what happened the night before, he didn't answer. He didn't deny it. He simply said, quietly, "It's still counting." No one knew what that meant. But by the end of the day, entire sections of the building had begun to malfunction. Elevators stopping between floors. Lights flickering without cause. Cameras freezing for fractions of a second at random. Always at 3:17. And neither was the building. At first, they told themselves it was contained. One building. One camera. One impossible event. That belief lasted less than 12 hours. The second piece of footage surfaced just before noon. Different building. Different city. Different security system. Same timestamp. 3:17 a.m. This footage came from a private financial tower overseas. Another Tier 7 facility. Another place built on silence and control. The camera froze. One frame. And when it resumed, there she was. The same black woman. Same posture. Same distance. Standing directly behind a different man. He was seated this time. Reading reports. Alone by protocol. No record of entry. No motion trigger. And just like before, she didn't exist in the footage until she already did. They thought it might be coincidence. Then the third clip appeared. Then the fourth. Each one from a different location. Different countries. Different industries. A defense contractor. A judge. A data broker. A man whose name never appeared in public records at all. Always the same timestamp. Always 3:17 a.m. Always the same woman. Never speaking. Never touching. Just standing behind them. Close enough that her shadow reached their backs. None of the men reacted in the moment. But every single one of them changed afterward. Some resigned without explanation. Some vanished entirely. One took his own life 2 days later. The analysts began laying the footage side by side. Overlaying frames. Measuring distance. The spacing was identical. She stood exactly the same number of inches behind each man. As if measured. As if precise. As if personal preference had nothing to do with it. The men shared no obvious connection. Different races. Different ages. Different beliefs. But when someone finally stopped looking at who they were, and started looking at what they'd done, the pattern locked into place. Every man had made decisions that ruined lives. Signed orders they never saw carried out. Approved systems that punished people they would never meet. Powerful men. Protected men. Men who believed consequences existed for other people. And every one of them, in the days after 317, showed the same behavior. Avoiding mirrors. Sleeping with the lights on. Refusing to be alone. As if they all knew the same thing. That what had stood behind them once could do it again. All of them powerful. All of them afraid. Once the pattern was undeniable, the theories began. People needed explanations. Labels. Something that could be named, and therefore contained. The first theory was the simplest. A hacker. An advanced visual intrusion. A projection inserted directly into secure feeds. But that fell apart almost immediately. The footage wasn't altered. No external signal was detected. No malicious code present. And a hacker wouldn't need to stand behind her targets. The second theory was more physical. An assassin. Someone so skilled they could bypass cameras entirely. But assassins leave traces. Breathing. Heat. Reflections. She left none. And assassins don't wait. The third theory leaned toward the supernatural. A ghost. A manifestation tied to a place, or a trauma. But ghosts are echoes. Repetitions of the past. She was responsive. Intentional. And she appeared in places with no shared history. So that theory died too. Next came the projection theory. Some experimental defense technology. A psychological weapon. But projections don't cast shadows. And they don't generate heartbeats. Still, the analysts kept digging. They ran her face through every database available. Criminal. Civilian. Military. Global. No match. They widened the scope. Historical records. Census archives. Medical databases. Nothing. Not even a partial. Then they tried something newer. They fed her image into an autonomous learning system. One designed to recognize patterns humans missed. The AI processed the frame for less than a second. Then it stalled. Not crashed. Stalled. When it resumed, it returned a single classification flag. Not unknown identity. Not no match found. Something else. Non-dexable entity. The system refused to assign probabilities. Refused to extrapolate. Refused to speculate. When prompted for clarification, it generated a follow-up note. One that hadn't been programmed. Subject does not exist within searchable parameters. Someone tried forcing the system to guess anyway. The AI complied. And immediately rolled back the output. As if correcting itself. The log showed one final status update before the process terminated. 5 words. Cold. Precise. Final. Unknown presence. Up until that point, every encounter with her had been indirect. Seen. Recorded. Analyzed. But never acknowledged. Until one man broke that pattern. He wasn't powerful. Wasn't important. Just a night security guard assigned to one of the buildings where the footage appeared. His name never showed up in official summaries. Only in an internal resignation log time-stamped 3:42 a.m. He didn't file a report. Didn't request counseling. Didn't even collect his last paycheck. He simply walked out. Later, when an investigator tracked him down, he agreed to speak. On one condition. No cameras. No recording. Just notes. The guard said he was stationed 2 floors below the room when it happened. He didn't see her. He heard her. A woman's voice. Quiet. Close. As if someone had leaned in just behind his ear. She didn't raise her voice. Didn't whisper urgently. She spoke the way someone does when they're already certain you're listening. She said his name. First and last. Pronounced correctly. That alone should have been impossible. But then she said something else. Something only he should have known. Something from years earlier. A choice he'd made when he thought no one was watching. A signature. A locked door. A decision that had ruined someone else's life quietly enough to forget. The guard said his knees gave out. That he dropped his flashlight and couldn't bring himself to bend down and pick it up. He said he could feel her standing behind him. Not touching. Not breathing. Just present. Waiting. He never turned around. He said he understood instinctively that doing so would make it real in a way it wasn't yet. That acknowledging her would invite something worse. When asked what she wanted, he shook his head. She didn't ask for anything, he said. She was just checking. The investigator asked him to clarify. To explain what he meant. The guard stared at the floor for a long time before answering. She was counting, he said. That was when he stood up, said he was done, and left. He never returned to the building. Never took another security job. And when someone asked him later if he'd seen her face, he said no. He says she never moved her mouth. 4 days, engineers argued over the freeze. Power surge. Corrupted firmware. Hardware failure. Every explanation pointed to malfunction. None of them held up. Camera 17 was dismantled and rebuilt piece by piece. The power supply tested clean. The storage drive showed no corruption. The firmware matched identical units installed throughout the building. There was nothing wrong with it. Which meant the freeze wasn't a failure. It was a decision. Someone reran the footage under controlled conditions. Same model camera. Same room layout. Same lighting. No freeze. No anomaly. The frame only locked when she was present. That realization changed the tone of the room. They dug deeper into the system logs. Not the footage, but the camera's internal behavior. Milliseconds before the freeze, the camera's processor spiked. Not from overload. From restraint. Fail-safes activated that were never meant to run together. Vision throttling. Frame locking. Memory isolation. The system had limited itself. As if continuing to process the image would cause damage. As if seeing her carried risk. One engineer suggested something no one wanted to hear. What if the camera didn't freeze because it broke? But because it understood? Security systems are designed to record everything. They don't hesitate. They don't look away. But this one did. Because when the footage was forced to continue, when they bypassed the lock and manually advanced the frames, the results were immediate. Heat spikes. Data corruption. One monitor cracked from internal pressure. The system shut itself down within seconds. After that, no one tried again. The official conclusion was amended quietly. Malfunction was replaced with protective event. And deep in the diagnostic report, in a section no one was meant to read, was a single line, flagged as anomalous. Visual persistence threshold exceeded. The system had reached a point where observation itself became dangerous. Not for her. For it. In the end, there was no sabotage. No attack. No enemy inside the wires. There was only a machine faced with something it was never meant to process. And choosing, for the first time in its operational life, to stop looking. The camera blinked first. They told themselves they were done. That nothing more could be gained from the footage. That whatever the system had seen was never meant to be understood. But curiosity has a way of surviving fear. Someone made a copy. Not of the video. Of the frozen frame itself. A single image. Pulled into an isolated workstation. No network connection. No automated processes. Just pixels. The recommendation was clear. Do not exceed 400% magnification. Beyond that, image degradation becomes unpredictable. They went to 800. The man's face broke down first. Features smearing into grain and shadow. The background followed. Walls dissolved. Light sources bled into static. But the woman behind him remained sharp. Sharper than before. As if resolution were being added, not lost. They pushed further. 1,200%. Her eyes came into focus. And that's when the room went quiet. Because human eyes don't open that wide. There are limits. Set by bone. By muscle. By anatomy. Her eyelids stretched past those limits. Not tearing. Not straining. Just accommodating. The whites of her eyes weren't white. They were darker than the rest of the image. Depthless. And they weren't pointed at the man anymore. They were pointed directly at the camera. At the lens. At the thing watching her. Someone whispered, "She sees us." No one corrected them. Then the timestamp changed. Not glitched. Not flickered. Changed. The numbers rolled forward on their own. 3:17. 3:16. 3:15. Counting backward. The system logs showed no input. No command. No clock adjustment. The frame remained frozen. But time inside it was moving. That's when someone finally said what had been circling the room since the beginning. What if 3:17 isn't when this happened? The numbers stopped. The timestamp reset. And the final still image saved itself under a new label. Pre-existing event. 3:17 wasn't the time she appeared. By the time they reached this point, no one was asking what she was anymore. They were asking why. The answer didn't come from the footage. It came from the men. From the timelines. From the decisions that had been made long before any camera froze. When investigators lined up the moments. Not just the recordings but the lives of the men involved. A pattern emerged that had nothing to do with time. 3:17 wasn't a minute. It wasn't an hour. It wasn't even a date. It was a condition. Every appearance coincided with a moment of finality. A signature placed where it couldn't be undone. An order approved with no appeal. A decision that crossed a line quietly. Permanently. 3:17 marked the point where something was owed. Not legally. Not morally. Existentially. The men didn't see her because they were being punished. They saw her because the account had closed. No appeals left. No revisions pending. No plausible deniability. The choice had been made. The harm locked in. That was the threshold. And she didn't arrive to collect. She arrived to confirm. Like a receipt printed after a transaction. Like a balance sheet finalizing itself. That explained why she never spoke. Why she never touched. Why she never needed to move. Her presence meant the debt was real. Unavoidable. Already counted. The guard hadn't been wrong. She was counting. Lives. Consequences. Time. And she only appeared when the count was complete. When denial was no longer possible. When the system, human or machine, could no longer pretend nothing had happened. 3:17 was the moment the universe stopped negotiating. And someone always owes. The footage still exists. That's the part no one likes to talk about. It was never destroyed. Never erased. Never fully contained. Every attempt failed. Hard drives wiped clean, except for that file. Servers burned, except for that frame. Entire systems decommissioned, only for the footage to reappear elsewhere. Copied without a source. Saved without a command. Always the same timestamp. 3:17 a.m. Every time someone checks, the camera still freezes. Still locks. Still refuses to move forward. And the woman is still there. But something has changed. The distance. In the earliest recordings, she stands just far enough back that her shadow barely touches the man. In later copies, she's closer. An inch. Then 2. Close enough now that her face is almost beside his ear. Close enough that, if the frame weren't frozen, you'd expect her breath to fog the glass. Analysts stopped measuring the space between them. Not because it couldn't be measured, but because the answer kept changing. The building where it first happened was eventually abandoned. Too many malfunctions. Too many unexplained shutdowns. Too many moments where people swore the cameras followed them instead of the other way around. But the pattern didn't stop. New footage still appears. New buildings. New men. Same woman. Same stillness. Same accounting. The system still tries to delete her. Still fails. Still logs the same message. And if you look closely, closer than recommended, you'll notice something else. In the most recent frame, she isn't just looking at the camera anymore. She's angled slightly, as if aware of someone standing just beyond the lens. As if the footage is no longer about them, but about whoever is watching now. So if you ever find yourself alone late at night, screens glowing, room quiet, and you get the sudden, unshakable feeling that someone is standing just behind you, don't check reflections. Don't look at shadows. Don't trust the cameras. Because some things don't appear until the count is finished. And when they do, if you ever see her behind you, don't turn around.